to solve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Michael?
Supervisors. Michael Taylor, District 1. I'm not sure when to talk about this, but just in general, I would like to suggest that anything that reduces transparency in voting be
The next item, Michael. Yeah.
Okay.
Under consent agenda.
I kind of wanted to talk about just in general consent. That the board directs staff to put things that have something to do with reducing transparency in voting, that it just doesn't go to the consent calendars. Most people, well, I don't look at consent normally, and I think that anything that has anything to do with elections, I would suggest that you guys advise staff to not put it on consent calendar. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Is there any other general public comment? Madam Clerk, any phone?
There's no callers, Chair.
Very good. We will close the general public comment, and we will go to our next agenda item, which is our consent calendar. These items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. These are either renewal contracts, amendments, or items that have previously come before the board. The Board of Supervisors will act upon them at one time without discussion. Any board member may request that an item be removed from the consent calendar for discussion. Members of the public wishing to ask questions or hear discussion on items listed under the consent agenda may now raise their concerns to the board members. The supervisors will take these concerns under consideration and decide if there is adequate reason to remove the item from consent. If an item is pulled by a board member, the concerns and questions asked by the members of the public will be addressed. No further public comment regarding the item will be received. Board, any item you wish to pull? Supervisor Swarthout.
Would like to pull item number 9.
Okay.
Pull item 32.
Item number 9 and item number 32. Any others? Okay. Any other items that the public would wish to see pulled? All right. Seeing none, is there any comments on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item number 9 and 32.
So moved. Second.
Motion Supervisor Hall, seconded Supervisor Swarthout. Madam Clerk?
District 4.
District 4, yes.
District 3.
Yes.
District 1.
Yes.
District 5.
Yes.
And District 2.
Yes. All right. We will go to item number 9 then. And Supervisor Swarthout, you asked to pull that.
Thank you. Yes. I received numerous emails and several phone calls on this item. I think some of the emails all of us received. And I actually had a nice conversation with our Clerk-Recorder yesterday, and I just would like her to maybe make a little presentation and explain this a little bit better to the public, because I believe it is a transparency issue. And while we live in this time where there's a perception that elections are not fair, that I think we should do all we can to make sure that the public trusts the work that our elections office does. So perhaps Natalie could come
Natalie, if you're prepared.
Good morning. You can hear me okay, right? Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present before you today. I appreciated the phone call yesterday that I had with you, Supervisor Swarthout, and the feedback that I have received from this board. So this is concerning item 23, 28, 19. One of the things that I've provided to you is a copy of the relevant law that is sort of featured in the item and featured in a memo that I wrote to you. So before I start, how much time do I have?
You go ahead, Natalie.
Yeah, okay. I'll try to not go on and on. So for those of you here who don't know me, my name's Natalie Adona. I am the Nevada County Clerk-Recorder. I'm coming to you today in my capacity as the Registrar of Voters, and also with a bit of knowledge having served on the State Ballot Design Advisory Committee. I was one of its co-chairs in 2021 and 2022. So I apologize in advance. I've had quite a bit of time to think about this bill and about ballot design issues, and I can see how you might have been caught off guard by this item. So the law in question is Elections Code 9170. It provides some sort of basic ballot requirements that are already sort of required by the state now. You might know that there are always a lot of state propositions and sometimes county measures that are included in all ballots. And what this law does is it adds certain information that's submitted by proponents and opponents of ballot measures. So when you see these arguments in the county and state voter information guides, there's typically a list of names of signers. And the state is asking for those signers that are included in those ballot arguments to be printed on the ballot with certain restrictions on listing organizations that they're associated with. There's also character limits. We're limited to 125 characters to be included on the ballot. That includes spaces, semicolons, commas, periods, stuff of that nature. So 9170 actually gives counties the option to opt out of this requirement, and it's only with respect to local ballot measures. This is sort of happening with state ballot measures no matter what we do. So a couple of the things that I wanted to sort of highlight here is that if you decide today that you either agree or disagree with our office's assessment, there's always the opportunity to revisit if we find that there's a sort of deep impact on the cost of elections, which I'll primarily be talking about today. I also do want to point out that there have been 12 counties that have opted out already, not to say that you have to go along with these 12 other counties, but there are some sort of weird legal consequences that I would like to point out. I'd also like to point out that these 12 counties do I believe value transparency just as we all do. And they also value, as you all do, fiscal responsibility and would like to avoid any potential litigation as a result of this law, which is, I think well-intended, but it is not perfect. So when I looked at AB 1416, which was a vehicle for which this new part of the Elections Code was included, I and many other elections officials looked at it as an unfunded mandate because we're very pessimistic about being reimbursed for any of the potential costs due to the length of the ballot, and we do think that the ballot will be elongated as a result, perhaps not for the next election, but certainly for November 2024, we're looking at potentially 16 statewide ballot measures that may be included on the ballot. So cost is really at the forefront of my mind here. So for every ballot card, which is basically a page, we pay about 28 cents per card. If we add another card, and if that card affects all ballot types, we're looking at about $25,000 added cost just for the paper. So I don't consider that to be a de minimis addition to the budget. Certainly when you add cards to ballots, you increase processing time, you increase staff time dedicated to not only extracting ballots, but reviewing data. And there is a high probability, because we're not going to be reimbursed by the state, most likely that this cost would be pushed onto the special districts and the school districts, who would have to sort of bear some of the burden of these costs. I also believe that Elections Code 9170 lacks sufficient clarity and potentially opens up for litigation. So while we have this limitation on the number of characters that we can include for a list of names, there's actually not a lot of guidance that the law or the regulations provide us when what we're given by submitters exceeds the 125 characters. There's probably a solution somewhere, but there is no process that's articulated. Our neighboring counties also may prevent us from printing this information at all. I'd like to direct you to paragraph D of Elections Code 9170. There is a sort of strange provision in there that says that a district measure or a school measure on a county ballot shall not include this list of names and supporters if in another county it doesn't appear on there as well. So it really takes one ballot measure that's shared between Placer or Yuba counties, which we do have districts that overlap, that would sort of prevent us from printing any of the names of supporters or opponents for any of our local ballot measures. I think that that is ripe for litigation. So if whether you decide today or not that you do or don't want to do this, I'm going to bring this to our association's legislative committee. I don't think that that was the intent of the law when it was passed. It's sort of going to have a strange ripple effect, I think. So for any of the counties who do want to include the names of these supporters and opponents, I think that they should be able to, and it just sort of irregardless of what a neighboring county sort of decides. But that is sort of a weird feature of the law to me that could catch us up in a court challenge. And court challenges lead to delays in printing, delays sort of lead to increased costs for elections. And that's certainly something I'd like to avoid. One of the last points that I would like to sort of make about this law is that there are some of my colleagues, and I haven't decided whether I agree with them or not, but sort of consider that there could be some type of electioneering that we have not seen before as a result of this law. So it is very possible that you have, say, a district that has some members up for election, and that same district wants to also include a ballot measure. This is pretty common in elections, and if you have somebody who's listed on the ballot as a candidate, and they're also a supporter or opponent of the district measure, their name could be included more than once on the ballot. And, I can say we work pretty hard on preventing any form of electioneering. If this is, in fact, electioneering, I certainly think that it poses some challenges and potentially an unfair advantage to someone who's listed multiple times on the same ballot. So I'll stop there. Hopefully I did not ramble on too much, and I'm happy to take questions and any other things that you'd like to talk about with respect to this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. And what I'd like to do with the board's approval here, I think I'd like to open this up to public comment on this particular item, and then we'll bring it back to the board for a full discussion. Absolutely, yes.
Thanks, Chair. Just a clarifying question to be really clear about what this does and doesn't do, which might also help the audience. So the only thing this applies to is, for example, a county ordinance. I mean, a county ballot measure. Because the state ballot measures already are doing this. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, the statewide ballot measures, all of that sort of rests with the Secretary of State, and the state tells us what to print. So that's sort of set aside. This law certainly does apply to countywide measures, but also to school district measures, special district measures, any kind of local measure. So, if we were to do nothing, or if, you all were to decide specifically to opt in, we would print the names on the ballot, of course, with the caveats that I had just described to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll open this up for a general public comment at this point. Michael?
Morning again. I'd just like to reiterate that I think this being on the consent calendar didn't actually meet the standards that you mentioned what would put this on the consent calendar. So I just want to really caution that I really believe that something like this should not be on a consent calendar. I would ask that you guys table this to give this more time of consideration. There is no hurry for this. We've got lots of time before the next election. I believe that this is a concern for the 2024 election. I think that the transparency on local measures, understanding who supports and who doesn't support items or measures, is important to the general community understanding how to vote. For example, if Barbara is someone that would consent to Measure V or something, then we would know that the board or the contract association are probably in line with her. So there's different people. Then there's cannabis, and then I think it's important to understand the stakeholders that are involved with local measures, because they do the work to understand if it's a good thing for the community or not a good thing for the community, or if it's a good thing for what they represent in the community. But I think it's important to give this more time. I think it's important to get more feedback from the general public, and that something that has anything to do with reducing transparency in our election have more public input. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Just a quick question, Natalie. All this information is within the voter's guide?
Yes. So every time we print a voter information guide and we get submissions for arguments for and against, it typically includes signers, and that's what the state is asking us to reproduce on the ballot. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because I do think that we have a great voter information guide that is chock full of really important information that voters can use to decide. I think what's interesting about this law is lawmakers are basically telling us, okay, well, take that same information and just print it somewhere else in addition to printing it in the voter information guide. And, I think that, generally that's actually a good idea. I am concerned, though, about the sort of fiscal implications and the sort of possibility that our ballot printing can be delayed due to litigation.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other public comment on this item? All right, Madam Clerk, phone call.
There's no callers, Chair,
Very
but I
good.
did want to report that the board
absolutely.
received 6
Absolutely.
emails prior to today from Carolyn Roth, District 3, Polly Halstead, District 1, Barry Pruitt, District 4, Michael Taylor, District 1, Joanna Rebane, District 1, and Terry McLaughlin. I'm not sure what district she resides in, and they all had concerns about the item.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Clerk. At this time, then, I will close the public comment on this particular item and bring it back to the full board for discussion. And I'll begin with Supervisor Swarthout, if...
Sure. Thank you, Natalie, for the clarification. A quick question. I didn't have an opportunity to go back and find some of my previous ballots, which I have them all somewhere in storage. How often, with local measures, do we print the names of the supporters in the ballot? I mean, I didn't recall seeing that with the Measure V. I remember seeing it in the voter information guide, but was it also on the ballot?
No, this has not been done before. It's a brand new law that was passed last legislative session. And, I think that some of the feedback from my sort of peers across the state was, ballots are very long. And, it is exhausting. If we had, absolute proof that, there'd be more people voting on those down ballot races as a result of printing supporters and opponents, and I think that some of our attitudes might change. But this is a brand new thing.
So we're not taking anything away.
No.
Okay. All right. And I think I appreciate the transparency issue and people really wanting to make sure that our elections are fair and balanced. And but I think the cost savings and the time. I mean, as a person who literally did not have my final results until 30 days after the election, I think that time is it's really critical, especially when you have a really short window from when you get elected to when you get seated. So at this point, after talking with you and your explanation, and hopefully the public understands what we're doing now, I don't have a problem moving forward on this one.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. It was interesting. I do feel like we're in this situation. This is interesting. Be clear again. The state already is doing this?
They're going to be doing it for the next set of elections, yeah.
So that'll be on the state ballot? Mm-hmm. Those questions will be on there?
Yeah.
Okay, I know. I just feel sometimes I'm looking at this. You gave a great report and explanation, and I get that. But it is kind of a volatile time in elections.
It is.
And I am a little concerned that you get beat up over that.
Well, you know.
But then I'm trying to look at that bigger picture of the finances. So, and the fact that it hasn't been on our ballot before, but it will be in our election booklet that comes out in its entirety.
Right. And, you know, like I said, there's always time to go back and redecide at a later point. I don't know if it's in this section of the code, but I believe that you know, the deadline for registrars of voters to bring items like this before the board is something like 30 days before the close of candidate filing or something like that. I'd have to sort of go back and check. So it's not like, you know, we're a one and done here. We can decide, okay, well, you know, maybe it's better for the community to actually reprint this stuff on the ballot. So you're not sort of locked down by this.
So just curious, because you've been on that committee, it's kind of interesting. I'm sure there's been a lot of conversation about this through the state already. So,
Yeah.
I mean, is there a chance it's going to be repealed or changed? I mean, at the cost, look what it's going to cost the state.
You know.
Well, it's going to cost all of us.
Right. Well, you know, probably not, because we had said time and again, this is going to cost a lot of money for our taxpayers, you know, for voters. You know, it's sort of not clear why you wouldn't just redesign the state voter information guide to make the information that you seek to sort of put out there a little bit more prominent. We do try, though, but sometimes state legislature is just going to do what it's going to do, and we just have to work with it, right?
Yeah. Thanks, Natalie.
Sure. Thank you.
Marty?
Thank you, Natalie. I don't have any specific questions. You know, I guess I do have a specific question. One of my questions relates to the transparency element, but can you list some of the other areas that a constituent could find information such as this, like Voter's Edge or Ballotopia or all the other areas that kind of aggregate information for voter information on opponents and proponents of measures?
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. I don't actually know whether Ballotpedia or, you know, Voter's Edge actually include the arguments and supporters and opponents. I believe that you know, they'll print what it's about. I think Voter's Edge specifically, you know, sort of gets into the campaign finance weeds. I don't actually know if they print out that information. Yeah, you know, probably because it is not easy to extract in a big data set for them to, you know, sort of cover the whole state. You know, for Voter's Edge specifically, but for Ballotpedia, they're working in the 50 states. You know, I know that there are groups who are working on sort of pulling that from websites, but not every jurisdiction is going to have information like that on their website. It might be, you know, sort of trapped in a VIG that's sort of behind a search feature that requires you to put in your physical address and your zip code.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so, you know, when this sort of came up a couple of days ago, I was thinking, well, you know, I mean, is there a way for us to, you make sure that this information is sort of more visible, more prominent. We can certainly do that on our website. We can look at, how our VIG is structured. So, I'm sorry, voter information guide.
Yep.
We can look at how that is structured and sort of make things a little bit more prominent or, sort of upfront. So, that's something that I'm happy to do and I think would be a little bit more cost effective.
So electronic media posting the same information, essentially, in the extended, expanded format, all the opponents, all the proponents, everything that you listed that we did for Measure V would be in electronic format on our website today, just as it always has been, no changes.
I think that right now it is within a module where you would have to look up your ballot from, based on your address. So you couldn't just say, as a non-Nevada County resident, just sort of pop in and look at the entire voter information guide.
But if from the voter's perspective, it's identical, including the electronic media portion that we would have in paper, would be published, no changes there. It's going to be exactly identical to how it's been done previously.
Yes, sir.
Okay, awesome. That's my only question. Thanks.
Heidi?
Thank you. So we get the voter information guide, and it lists all the proposition, and it lists who supports them and who doesn't support them. And we can take that guide with us into the voting booth, or we can sit at home with our ballot and our voter information guide and have far more information in the guide than you could even fit in the 125-character piece on the ballot. Right?
Yes.
So all that information we can have right there with the ballot. That's not going to change. So given that, my concern is actually the legal issues. I mean, in the letter you sent us, we talked about how are we going to, how is somebody's name going to put on there? If you put my name on there, is it going to be as a supervisor? Is it going to be as an employee? As somebody else? Is it going to be, are you going to call me Mrs. or supervisor? Or someone going to get upset about how it's written? And then the legal issues associated with that too, or people changing their minds, and then do you take them off the ballot? So I think the ballot is pretty sacrosanct. It's very important to get it right on there, and I'm not opposed to more transparency, but I'd rather opt out this year and see how it goes, maybe in the rest of the state, and then we can come back and opt in if they iron some of those things out. It seems to me to be a wise way to go. And I want to acknowledge to Mr. Taylor, I agree this shouldn't have been on consent. I think it was an oversight, but that is why we have this option to pull items so we can discuss them at more length. So I think this has been very helpful, that really what we'd be adding here is very minimal, but it could be costly, it could be legally an issue, and it's not really going to increase a lot of transparency. So I think I'm comfortable with it you're suggesting as well.
Very good. Thank you, Heidi. I will say this, as the person who's responsible for the agendas and where those items go, Michael, it was not intentionally put on the consent. It really did catch us off guard, and I personally apologize for that. But looking at the item itself, the thing that really got me is when you look at transparency, the first thing I thought in my mind is, oh my gosh, yes, it's got to be on there. It's got to be on there. But then in looking at some of these details, as you discussed, Natalie, one of the things that caught me, it was the cost of the election itself. Each page, if I'm correct, would add another $25,000 approximately. Okay. And I look at that as a county expense. We could take care of that. And your office has a little more work. Okay, that's okay. The thing that bothers me is the districts. Maybe not the schools as much, but when we look at our small districts, I look at our Park and Recreation District in Bear River, they look for ways to avoid the election. The competitiveness disappears from it because it's so costly to become involved with the election that they have to, they can't afford it. It'll break some of those little districts. So that was the one thing that really caught my mind. The other thing was, as Heidi brought up, the 125 characters. I could see that no matter what you do, there would be a accusation that you or we did something. I mean, this, in my mind, the state does it all the time, right? So I could see that being a major issue too. So in my mind, I think I agree with Heidi. Just like you say, if we put it on there, we could always take it off. Mm-hmm. If we don't put it on right now, we can always put it back if we feel that we are missing something. The fact that that information is in the voter's guide and can be found.
So I have a question. I'm just going to say, this did come out of the blue a little bit. I mean, what is the option? I would like to maybe let our community, there's a lot. I went to a meeting yesterday, and this was a topic of conversation. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So where do we have opportunity to really kind of share this and get people's minds at ease that this is not going to be a transparency issue? I mean, this came right about. I'm just looking at the public, and how do we really make them see that this, what's interesting to me, though, is it doesn't happen now. It's not been on our ballot before. Mm-hmm. So this is all new to add this to our ballot. Never been on the ballot before. And I do like the idea that you're committing to do something in the VIG. Yes. That would help be more explicit, too. I like that. So, but I'm just wondering, do we really have to make a decision today and have opportunity to explain people without... I mean, no matter where we get, we're going to have this kind of issue, but I think it'd be better to be able to go out and explain this. I couldn't explain this very good yesterday in my meeting, right? But I feel like I have a little bit better of a sense, and you did a beautiful job on the paper that you sent, that I just read it today because I wasn't in here yesterday, I was out. But I just would like to be able to share that with my constituents. So, I don't know, that's just a thought.
Good thought.
Just one quick clarification on your timing. You described, obviously there's no time pressure associated with this because the 30-day prior to the closing. Is there any exact, I guess, is that the most exact timeline you can give us? My question is, can we delay this 30 days without repercussion?
Yeah, I think that's possible. I will consult the elections code. It's upstairs in my office, so I can get you a more specific answer.
Chair Schofield, with the assistance of one of my deputies in my office, so looked up the law. So the date for this decision is basically the election day minus 81 days. So that would translate to about mid-November of this year of when we have to make a decision. So thanks.
All
right. I would propose to support what Supervisor Hook is discussing and delay this for 30 days so that we can talk more about it.
Okay, sure. And,
No, that's all right.
Oh.
It's up here now, okay?
Oh, sorry.
Is there a second to that motion?
I will second that.
All right. Madam Clerk?
Who seconded? I apologize.
Supervisor Swarthout, I apologize.
District 4?
Yes.
District 3?
Yes.
District 1?
Yes.
District 5?
Yes.
And District 2?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Natalie. So we'll bring this back in a future meeting. We won't put it on a consent agenda, okay, Michael? Very good. Thank you again, Natalie. Thank you, Board. So at this time, let's go to item number 32. This is Supervisor Bullock's item.
All right, I got to shift gears here a little bit. Chairman, thank you. Thank you. I pulled this. This is a resolution to designate the Chinatown of Truckee with a plaque from the Historical Commission. And I just want to mention, I'd like to pull this and delay this for 30 days. We've done a lot of work. Terry McAteer has helped in other areas to distinguish the contribution that the Chinese immigrants have made toward our culture and things on Donner Summit, including the Donner Summit train tunnels. We're in active work, and the board has authorized a resolution in 2022 to acknowledge their contribution and make that a National Historic Register place. And so I got a comment late yesterday from a constituent with concerns, justice and equity concerns related to the placement of this plaque. And while I don't share exactly everything related to that letter, I do think that it's worth delaying and deferring the passing of this resolution till next month, so we can have a few conversations locally in Truckee about the plaque and answer some of the questions that came up. Supervisor Hall and I were on NADHOC where we specifically discussed the difference of making a designation historically of a person versus a place. And so it was a conscious and meaningful choice to designate places and not people. And so it really removed a lot of the controversy surrounding some of the things. Historically speaking, there's controversy around just about every single thing we've done as a community. And we recognize that and we honor that. We also honor the people that are involved in those places, right? Which is the plaque is designed to honor. So with that, I'd like to just defer this for 30 days, get some questions answered, and talk with some of the historical commission, some of the people in Truckee. And I just wanted to thank Bernie for all of his work and the work of the Historical Commission and bringing these things forward. I know it's a lot of work, and we look forward to passing these when they do come before us. But this one in particular is charged with some pretty significant sentiment, and I want to talk about that before it comes back to the board.
Okay. Madam Counsel, do I open this to public comment on that particular? Yeah.
Yes, because you gave them a chance for a consent. I mean, I think that would be fine.
Okay, then I will open the public comment on this item with the caveat that one of the authors of it is asking it to be pulled for a later date. Is there any public comment? Very good. A phone call?
There's no callers, Chair, but I did want to report that the board received the email yesterday from Jean Fournier, and which brought the conversation up.
Yeah, I assume that's very good. All right, then we will close the public comment, bring it back to the board, and I'll turn it back to Supervisor Bullock.